growing up a teenager in Iran, getting bombed by Iraqis during the 8 years of war between Iran and Iraq, seeing Baha'is get killed by the Iranian government, getting expelled from school. I did not think for a moment, for good or bad, that China or Russia is going to save me. But I did think that the US may save me. And that is a hope that every teenager anywhere in the world has. Even if you think about that boy in Gaza today that is living in the worst possible situation on the planet, that boy is not thinking that Saudi Arabia is going to save me, Iran is going to save me, China or Russia. That boy also has hope in the US. And to me, that is a place of privilege for us as Americans. That is a spiritual destiny for us as Americans that not only we should not run away from, we should embrace it. I mean, what a gift that we represent hope to the world.
Payam, welcome to the show. Thank you for being a guest. Very excited for our conversation today.
Thank you, Chase. Same here. I'm really looking forward to it.
There are probably a handful of listeners who are not familiar with you or your work, your backstory, if you will. So I'm wondering if you can begin our conversation by giving us a little bit of context. Start us off at the beginning, and of course, we're going to have a wide-ranging conversation today. Right. But give us a little backstory.
Oh God, that's a big question. Where do I begin? So the backstory is that I was born a Baha'i in Iran. Now that's not a walk in the park, because that's kind of like being born in a very hostile environment that a lot of people are out to get you, particularly the government. So a few things happened as part of that experience that I would say to a large extent defined the direction of my life. Mm-hmm. And a couple of times that I did not think I'm going to get out of situations alive, for example. And then in the 80s, I became a refugee. I ended up escaping Iran and making it across the border to Pakistan as a teenager without my family. And then ultimately, in 1988, I came to the US as a refugee. I was accepted during the Ronald Reagan regime, and they had an open door policy for Baha'is. But then I found myself in the US without parents, with no money, did not speak the language, and I had to survive. Now, you fast forward 11 years later, I'm in New York at NASDAQ, and I'm taking my first company public. So a lot went right during those 11 years, but also it is hard to, but not to think about the fact that only in America. So there's a part of the story that's about, how in the US we have opportunities that really bring hope to the world. And that's something that through my book, I like to see people embracing. And then my story goes beyond that, okay, well, now what? I took a company public. And that is when I got exposed to a lot of things about our culture of capitalism that did not sit well with me. And I wanted to see change, evolve. So that's kind of like my life pursuit now as I continue to be an entrepreneur.
Well, we're going to go into that. You acknowledged the book, which we will definitely talk about today. It's called Crossing the Desert. Phenomenal read. And, you have to really love a book to read the advanced PDF, because I don't know if you've ever read a PDF, but it is a beautiful read. I want to say thank you for creating it. Also, wildly inspiring. Crossing the Desert being the journey that you made to, I'll say escape. I don't know if that's a word that you would use, but
sure.
The persecution that you were experiencing in Iran. The point that you made there at the end is something that I'm going to throw out ahead of us, and I want to revisit it, but I've got some questions in the meantime. The thing I want to make sure to put a pin in is that the promise that we have in this country, the opportunity, the hope, because I think, when I saw your book come out, and it's not lost on, I think, a lot of people listening, that hope is murky right now for a lot of people through the geopolitical climate. There's a lot going on in the world, and also we get information faster and more awkwardly maybe than ever before in history. You could say more transparently, but that's actually not even clear. So hope is at a premium right now, and your life, your book, and I think the story that we're going to share today with the listeners is really a beacon of hope. So I'm going to put that pin out there, but I do want to go back to crossing the desert. I mean, it's probably part of as a summary of your life in all of the chapters, and I'm asking you to summarize it in 90 seconds. But crossing the desert, it was incredibly risky, and I'm wondering if you can sort of detail that for us a little bit,
Sure.
because it's easy to just, oh yeah, and then I fled Iran, but let's get some details here, because I think it's helpful for people to know
Mm,
what you went through in order to get here.
yeah. So, as I mentioned, I was born in a Baha'i family, and in the 1980s, Baha'is were heavily persecuted in Iran. And one may ask why. The Islamic Republic of Iran, the fanatical regime that runs Iran, doesn't like minorities in general, but particularly Baha'is. There are certain principles that we stand for that they don't like equality of men and women. Like the fact that science and religion should agree. If they don't, it's religion that's at fault because it's dogma, superstition. The fact that we don't think we need clergy at this point because we think that we're educated enough. We don't need a middleman between us and God. Well, the country is run by clergy, so they don't like that either. The point is that they find our beliefs to be very progressive. So they killed a lot of Baha'is and they imprisoned many. As an 11-year-old, I was expelled from school in the worst possible manner you can imagine by a mob of students that intended to kill me on that day. Um, so when my parents decided that it was time to send me outside of Iran, and I was 16 years old, they had to find a smuggler because the government had also taken our passports away. They wanted us to stay in Iran and suffer. They did not want us to even leave the country and just leave them alone. So you can imagine that for a law-abiding group of people, finding a smuggler is not an easy task. So my mom was on the pursuit of finding a smuggler to smuggle her son out of the country. My brother and sister had already left in a similar manner. So she found a smuggler, and I remember I was in Tehran. We lived in Shiraz, southern part of Iran, but that day I was in Tehran, and the next day I was supposed to take the bus to the border town in Iran, and with my mom. But the smuggler said that you two are not going to sit next to each other. When you get off the bus after a 24-hour bus ride, you cannot say goodbye to your mom. You cannot act like you know her, because if you do, that will get attention. We did as we were told. We got to the border town. I got off the bus with a small duffel bag, and I walked to the street, and a car stopped, asked me to get in. I got in, and he sped away. And all I remember was that I looked back and I saw my mom that I had not said goodbye to. I did not think I'll ever see again. And I could see in her face that she must be crying out loud inside, but she cannot communicate that, she cannot show that. And all I could think at that moment was, what a country has done to you that you feel that your son, your only remaining son, is better off with the smugglers that by nature should not be trusted than staying with you. And that was a plight of Iranians, Baha'is in particular, at that time, and continues to be. The car made a left turn, and that was it. And my mom was out of sight. And all I know is that I was heartbroken, thinking that she has to get back on that bus and drive for 24 hours back. And that drive takes you through the desert, which is called the Emptiness Desert. NASA calls it the hottest place on the planet. They have recorded temperatures of 152 Fahrenheit. And the rest of the journey is that I spent the next 7 days in a hidehouse, on trucks, on motorcycles, hiking, whatever you can imagine, on a bus ride that you can only imagine out of movies, that there are goats and chickens and whatever, on that bus. and made my way through one of the most dangerous places on the planet where Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan meet. It's the no man land. It's where the worst things on the planet take place there. Until I made it to the first border town in Pakistan, Kuwaita. Um, it's one of those journeys that you're not supposed to survive, and you know that if you are spotted by the border guards on either side, because again, you're entering a country also illegally. You're not just living illegally, you're entering illegally. They don't try to stop you. It's too dangerous for them too. So they simply use rocket propelled grenade to take you out. So making that journey and surviving it changes your life, because there are few challenges in life that will compare to that as being significant. There's no question that that journey represented the second thing that I would say defined my life. The first was the way I was expelled as an 11-year-old from a school in Iran, which I was not supposed to survive that event either.
To say that that prepared you and that you were playing in gambling terms, you were playing with house money after you've made
Yes,
you've made that
that's a good way
journey.
to put it.
Yeah, is is not meant to downplay that. It's in fact just the opposite. Do you feel well? First of all, a little bit on the Baha'i faith. If you could articulate just a little bit more, because it's not cited as one of the the top 5 religions of the world, and yet I know many in the Baha'i
Yeah,
faith. My next door neighbor is Baha'i. Rainn Wilson, who's a mutual friend of
sure.
ours, the actor from The Office, is Baha'i. He's been here in the studio to share his views, and you've been on the Soul
Hmm.
Boom podcast. Give a little backstory on that. If you mentioned just a couple of the
Sure.
core tenets earlier, but I think that that's it's an opportunity to share a little bit about your faith.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, the Baha'i faith is a relatively young religion. It's about 170 years old. It came out of Iran, where Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder, was born. But ultimately, as you know, I'm not sure it's the prophecies or that's how God plans these things, that Baha'u'llah was sent to exile by the Muslim clerics. So he ended up ultimately uh, dying in Israel. And so he's buried close to Mount Carmel in Akkad. So as a result of that banishment, Israel has become our holy land as well. I would say that the most fundamental belief that Baha'is follow is the concept of the progressive revelation, meaning that we believe there is no beginning and end to religions, that God's grace will never end. And if there is only one God, then there's got to be only one truth. It doesn't make sense to believe that there's one God but many different truths. So we believe that religions are fundamentally one. And it is simply the non fundamental teachings of religions that change every 1,000 years or so. No religion ever came that said that don't believe in life after death, don't believe that there's a soul, don't believe that there's a God. They all taught us those fundamental beliefs. They all taught us truthfulness. They all taught us faithfulness. All of those things that are the fundamental truths of all religions are the same. What has changed are the non essentials. How do you pray? Do you cover your hair or you don't? Stuff like that. So that's why we believe that there's a fundamental unity between religions that has gone unnoticed. And so the number one task for Baha'is is to bring about unification of human race as members of one family, as brothers and sisters. So that's what we work for. Abdul Baha, the son of the Prophet founder of faith, reminds us that love is that only glue that keeps us all together. So, that's why the number one core value of my company is lead with love, because without that, nothing else is possible.
Beautiful summary there. Thank you very much for sharing. And uh, it seems like that obviously your upbringing and values, you can see that prominently in all of your companies, your work, your book. You've done a beautiful job sharing that. Explain for us, if you can, this arrival in
Mm,
a new place, seeing that point that we made earlier about the hope that you
yeah,
had, and what a remarkable time frame, 11 years from showing up on the country's doorstep to exiting, a billion and change, I think was the number, on, the NASDAQ. Is it the NASDAQ? Is that right?
that's right.
Yeah. That is virtually unheard of. And yet here you are living proof. So talk to us about that process, a little bit about the company, and specifically the role that hope played in that process.
So on June 20th, 1988, World Refugee Day, I landed in San Francisco, and I was carrying this bag that identified me as a refugee. So as I was going through airports with a group of refugees, everybody knew that, we are stateless. And it still causes me to choke up when I talk about that. And when I see those people, even now at airports, it brings tears to my eyes, to just know that anxiety and what's going through their heart and their mind at that point. I landed in San Francisco. My brother and I were together. My cousin, who lived in Modesto, California, was there to pick us up. He was the only person we knew in the U.S. And I talk about it in my book that unfortunately my cousin, he committed suicide a few years later. So the person who was one of the reasons I came to the U.S., I lost a few years later, which was a big loss, big shock. Um, so I had to make ends meet. So, we had $75 between us in our pockets. And the first meal I had was an ultimate cheeseburger Jack in the Box. My brother, my cousin, and I, $17. So I'm thinking that the 75 is not going to last very long. Um, I had high school to finish. Then I went to college. And it wasn't until 1994 that my brother and I we both graduated from university, that one day my brother called and said that, look, I've been thinking about buying a car, and Honda does not have a website. What do you think? Should we start one? Well, I didn't know much about the internet, so he helped me get to know that a little bit more. But I loved cars. I had owned, and living in Modesto, that's the place for muscle cars. That's where American Graffiti Night happened. And so I had owned many cars, cheap cars like Ford Pintos and 1976 Camaro. So I love the idea of arming consumers with information about cars and helping them to get a better deal so they don't become a victim of their lack of knowledge. Um, so we started that business called AutoWeb.com with the idea of building this marketplace for cars. And I became the sales guy. My brother became the techie. And I went out there. I remember going to 150 dealerships, trying to get them signed up for something I'd never heard of before, the internet. We finally were able to build that up, but it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of challenges. We didn't know anything about building a business in the U.S. We had not even heard of the term venture capitalist. Against all odds, frankly, we built that business. But there were many people, and I acknowledge some of them in my book, that
Yes.
they helped us understand the system. They guided us, that allowed us to build that business to what it became. And we were ultimately able to take that public in 1999, which, albeit anyone with a pulse could have taken a company public. We did at that point, but we had built a real business. Second to eBay, we were the only other profitable business online at that point. So seeing that company go public and gain a $1.2 billion market cap at that point, I was 28, and 11 years earlier I'd come from, as a refugee to the country. Of course, I was just thinking that this can only happen um, in America. But if you don't mind, I'm going to touch on this concept of hope, because
Please.
growing up a teenager in Iran, getting bombed by Iraqis during the 8 years of war between Iran and Iraq, seeing Baha'is get killed by the Iranian government, getting expelled from school. I did not think for a moment, for good or bad, that China or Russia is going to save me. But I did think that the US may save me. And that is a hope that every teenager anywhere in the world has. Even if you think about that boy in Gaza today that is living in the worst possible situation on the planet, that boy is not thinking that Saudi Arabia is going to save me, Iran is going to save me, China or Russia. that boy also has hope in the US. And to me, that is a place of privilege for us as Americans. That is a spiritual destiny for us as Americans that not only we should not run away from, we should embrace it. I mean, what a gift that we represent hope to the world. What an amazing position to have, and embracing it, wanting to have that position. I truly believe that's a spiritual destiny for us.
Mm. You have channeled so much of your experience into this next chapter of your life, fully, um, I guess, empowered by this undercurrent of hope. And you've got a new a business called the One Planet Group, which is a company that invests in early stage companies that invest specifically in making society a better place. Is that uh, does that new venture, relatively new since your exit a number of years ago, is that the manifestation? Is that the business manifestation of the vehicle for hope that you're trying to spread, throughout the world? Is it just a side project and there's something else that's more important to you? Where does this land on your um, where does this fit into the equation of
Mm,
hope that you're
sure.
providing for us?
I mean, I guess the best way to think about it is that I'm an entrepreneur. And entrepreneurship to me simply means building things. And it doesn't have to be a business. Now, it just happens that that is what I have passion for and I think I'm good at. Uh, so I see my ability to build this business in a manner that can help also evolve the way we build businesses as a way that it can contribute to the betterment of the world. It's my trade. It's just how I know how to operate. And the way this whole thing came about was that, which is, by the way, it's full circle. The same spiritual beliefs that I had when I was getting beaten up in Iran. It's the same spiritual beliefs, but used in a different ecosystem. Uh, but a few years ago, probably about 10 years ago, I was at a conference. And in that conference, a woman who was the head of a nonprofit uh, gave, a, uh, gave a keynote. And I remember turning to my wife and saying that I'm jealous. She said, "What do you mean?" I said, she goes to work every day and she's offering service. She's fulfilled. She's got joy. Now, you got to think about the fact that when I took my company public, at that moment, what was I thinking about? Okay, what comes next? Another IPO, bigger IPO, another company I'm going to build, bigger company, because no IPO, no selling of a company by itself brings you joy. It just simply doesn't. And if that is going to bring you joy, somebody is doing something bigger and better and more interesting. So you have to keep running after the next thing. But what was interesting about that woman was she was getting joy and fulfillment every day. Why? Because she was serving. So what went through my mind is that why do nonprofits stand for betterment of the world and for profits for greed? How can we change that equation? Why can't business stand for also betterment of the world? There's a Baha'i belief that teaching that tells us that work offered in the spirit of service is same as worship. To me, that's elevating work, profession to the same level as me praying. That's amazing. That's phenomenal. So I wanted to find a way to infuse my business with those spiritual elements that would allow me to serve the world. And it has been an interesting path. And a lot of it came about as a result of, frankly, that spark of the idea from that speech, but
Mm.
also from the negative experience that I had after taking the company public and seeing that that system that capitalism is running on, it is in fact rigged. It is not designed well. It is not designed to serve all of us. It is designed to serve a few who know how to best take advantage of that system. I'll share this with you that if you think about the billionaires in this country, very few of them ever generated billions in cash flow. Almost all of them exclusively made their money from stock appreciation. Now, on the surface, you may say, well, that's a good thing. They're building companies, the value of the company goes up, they cash out their stock. But the stock is manipulated, not necessarily in an illegal way, but often in an unethical way, because the stock gets manipulated every 90 days for the sake of managing to the expectations of the market. Sometimes you do that manipulation by firing employees. Sometimes you're doing it by hiring employees. Sometimes you do it by having crazy announcements. The point is that you keep managing the stock price because the only thing you care about is maximization of shareholder value. Now, I heard one of the CEOs of a Fortune 500 company in front of the US Congress say, unethical is not illegal, make it illegal so I won't do it. How do you make unethical illegal? Because there's no end to it, there's always a way to go around it. And I think that can truly only happen through spiritual transformation. Unless my heart wants to do good in the world and not proactively do bad, that's going to come from my core. That's not going to come from the laws. Laws are not going to make me not racist. Laws may make me scared of being racist, but they will not make me not racist. So that is going to be a spiritual transformation that's required. And that's what I like to see happening, the spiritual transformation for businesses and the way we operate there.
That is so elegant. Again, thank you. And this is very prominent in the book, which again, I absolutely highly recommend, Crossing the Desert. You know that the listenership for our show is, they largely identify as creative, as entrepreneurial. So you are speaking to a bunch of folks right now who are clued into this, and maybe we can extend this concept, as you have in the book and elsewhere, to the concept of spiritual capitalism, that these things are not antithetical, despite some of the frameworks thinking about maximizing shareholder value, that there is a way to do this in an ethical, just, and I would say, use the word love, heartfelt, heart
Yeah.
forward way. Can you continue to inspire us and share a little bit more about spiritual capitalism?
Yeah. I mean, to me, and by the way, when I say spiritual capitalism, some people don't like it. They say that spiritual capitalism, you're adding the word spiritual to something that's highly material. You can't do that. And then some other people say, oh, you're a socialist. And I'm like, I'm not, because I don't think socialism or communism works. So I am an entrepreneur. I'm a capitalist, but I feel like it needs to be evolved. It's not the Bible that we should keep it as it is. We haven't, and the Milton Friedman version of capitalism that we've been practicing has left us wanting a lot more. So I want to help us get there. But I feel like this whole concept of spiritual capitalism starts with something very simple, which is the tagline of my business: innovation plus intention. Meaning that that word intention to me matters a great deal. When people ask me, are you afraid of AI? My answer is, I don't know. Am I afraid of the innovator behind AI? Because it's not the innovation I'm afraid of, it's the innovator that I'm afraid of. The innovator and the intention of that innovator, that what do they want to accomplish? I have no problem with social media. But I do have a problem with social media when, for example, Snapchat gives us a chance to rate our friends. Well, I think that's a problem because I think the intention behind it, it is not one that's going to bring us closer together. It is going to cause anxiety, mental health issues, and all kinds of other problems. So the intention is simply making more money because maybe the stock price is down, maybe they somehow need to manage Wall Street, and they have to address that. And they realize that by doing that, time on app goes up and it somehow benefits them. So that intention represents the ripple effect of our economic decisions. Every CEO, every employee, every executive makes economic decisions every day, considering the ripple effect of those decisions. To me, that's the number one and the most important thing behind the concept of spiritual capitalism. That's one. The second thing is, what is, if everything is done and gone with 50 years from now, people think back, did your business make the world ever so slightly a better place? Did you make the world ever so slightly a better place? Because that is your legacy, and that's a legacy you want to leave behind. The money you can't take with you, all the private flights you took, the nice planes you flew, all the nice shows you went to, nice dinners, it's all gone and done with. Did you contribute to the betterment of the world and serve others? And majority of our time is spent at work, our waking hours. How do we do that? So I fundamentally believe that every business, Simon Sinek talks about this really well also in his book, The
Mm-hmm.
Infinite Game, that
Yeah.
every company should have a just cause. Like the just cause that we have in my company are two. It's elimination of racism in America and healing of racial wounds. And the other one is education of girls and women and worrying about the plight of girls and women all over the world. Now, I also like to really remind my fellow entrepreneurs and executives and CEOs that just because I'm good with software or the internet, just because you may be good for media, doesn't mean that you can also find solution to hunger, solution to cancer. Be humble. There are people who are better than us for those fields. Empower them. Help them do more of the good thing that they are doing. So that just cause is really important. So I highly recommend every business adopt that. The third thing is give sacrificially. So give so much as a company, not 1%. Give so much of your profits, of your resources, of your shares, of whatever that you have that is part of your success, that as a result, your economic decisions have to be modified because you don't have as much money as you would have had otherwise. And some people may say that I'm not in the business of running a nonprofit. Why would I do that? I'm not asking you to run a nonprofit. I'm asking you to run a very successful for profit that cares about the betterment of the world. And you give sacrificially because that's what's required to really make the world a better place. And there are many other factors. Another one that to me really matters a great deal is getting my entire employee base involved in service. So we offer service days that employees go out there, they get paid, but they offer service however they see fit. The point here is the paradigm needs to shift. Now, we know that there are many, many billionaires every year in this country, and that group is growing. We know there are people worth over $100 billion, but they're still chasing more billions. And I would like to propose to them that maybe chasing for more billions is not the right way to approach the rest of their lives. I'm not asking them to not run highly successful businesses, but start measuring your success a little bit differently. There are more factors than the archaic way of thinking that only maximization of my personal wealth, only measuring my ability to consume more at the end of the day should be the sole way I'm going to measure my success. That seems pretty archaic. And I think there's an opportunity for us to change that.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. We should acknowledge that. Um, there's a paradox that I'm
Mm,
curious to get your take on, which so many of these messages, there's this a twist that it is often after achieving, as you stood there, rang the bell in the Nasdaq, and for unreasonable sums of money, and it is sort of that arc. And I think Jim Carrey, the actor, said it. I wish everyone could get rich and famous because they could see that that's not the answer.
mm,
And yet the threads of capitalism in our culture, in our upbringing, our conditioning are so strong
yeah,
that it's the message from the people who are spiritual, connected, heartfelt, earnest people like yourselves. When you stand in front of us and share, hey, look, this is not the promised land. We really need to be of service. And then you've shared, as you just have. And what is to keep people from, cynicism is the scariest thing in the world to me. It's the saddest thing in the world, because what keeps people from saying, easy for you to say, you have $100 million in your pocket. Let me just get there. I'll figure it out. And then maybe I'll see the same light that you have. But
yeah.
I kind of need to figure that out for myself. Like, it's sort of a hold my beer while I do this, and then I'm going to be spiritually
Mm,
enlightened. And they want both. And so
yeah,
is there a message that you feel like you could share with people who are like, well, let me try.
yeah.
Trust me, it's not worth being rich and famous. And they're saying, well, I'll give that a taste. I'll tell you what I think. And then hopefully I come, to see the wisdom that you have. What would you share with people that are so tainted by our culture?
I'm so glad you bring this up because I myself get bothered a great deal when I see somebody who's made billions and billions of dollars. Once they are in retirement, they become high and mighty about how the rest of us civilians should operate. And I absolutely see that cynicism. Now, I think it's important to note that I made $200 million when I was 28, when I took the company public. I lost 95% of that. And so I had to rebuild my life more than once. And when I look back, that's the best thing that could have happened to me. Because if I, as a 28-year-old, if I had that money, I don't know what I would have become. But I think that going through that process of losing and having to rebuild and regain, it was really an interesting experience that I believe gave me a bit more wisdom about how to do it. Now, having said that, I think it's really, really important for people to keep in mind. I'm not suggesting that I'm not for the idea of building great businesses and becoming wealthy. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do believe that there needs to be, in a sense, something else that drives us beyond maximization of our ability to consume. There's got to be something else because you can do that. At the end, you're not going to have the joy and the fulfillment that you would like to have to be a happier human being. So do this for your own sake. Forget everybody else. You personally want to be happy. No amount of yoga retreats and fasting retreats and so on are going to give you that fulfillment that a life of service will. So my point is make that journey worth living. Because keep in mind, if you're an entrepreneur, overwhelming majority of businesses don't make it. Overwhelming majority of businesses don't have that significant exit or the IPO. They just don't. They may become decent businesses that they have a cash flow, they pay for your living expenses, and that's great. So don't wait for a day for all of a sudden for you to get to a place that you can live the life. This is it. This is the life. Let's start living it now. It is how we live it, how we build these businesses that can really define who we are. And here's fundamentally the thing that I have learned. When you start putting love at the center of your business, the betterment of the world at the center of your business, taking care of your employees, doing profit share, giving sacrificially, these are not the kinds of things you can fake because they become fundamental parts of your culture. When you do that, your employee retention goes up, your vendors love you, they want to work with you, your customers, they love that kind of a business. They want to spend money with that kind of a business. What I've learned is businesses that follow these kinds of principles, they in fact become more successful, not less successful. So I think that it's really important to keep in mind you're not giving up financially either by doing this. The only thing that you're doing is you are having a much longer horizon as the way you will be going about defining your success and the way you will define your success.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. This is adopting this. I feel like people perceive a gap between where they are now and when they can begin this process. And, it's a constant message in the book, and you've made the point here, but I want to give you another chance to cement it. When is the time to begin that process for people who are listening? And what does that look like in action?
Yeah, I do two things in my company. I own a few businesses that we own and operate, and we also invest in startups. We think that the best time to basically infuse your business with this DNA is from day one. So when people come to us because they want seed capital, as part of the money we give them, we ask them to sign a document that says for the betterment of the world. And in this document, it says that for the love I have for humanity, I'm willing to do certain things. I'm willing to give sacrificially when I have it. I am going to use resources, so on and so forth, to ever so slightly contribute to humanity. We want people to get used to the concept of what I'm going to call universal philanthropy. That you don't have to be super wealthy to be a philanthropist, because philanthropy represents a giving mentality. And I can have $1,000 in my bank account. If I give $10, I'm a philanthropist. So we want all of us to become philanthropists, and that small business, that brand new business, to also embrace that from day one. To me, that's ideal, but doesn't have to be the case. If you've been doing this for a long time, great. You can start infusing it at any moment in time. But again, you cannot fake it, and you're not doing it for a check mark. You're not doing it because it's politically correct. You're doing it because you believe that fundamentally that will make you a better entrepreneur, better executive, better employee, and your company a better company. I mean, I'll use the example of DEI. DEI has been a big deal these days. The idea of having diversity and inclusion and so on as part of my work. The problem is that the world looks at that as a way to get the check mark and announce that we care about DEI. And guess what? I have a DEI executive on board too who cares about this. I believe that you should do DEI. You should care about diversity, inclusion, because you know that will make you a better company. You want to look like humanity because you serve humanity. That is the point. To do things from your heart and not for the sake of PR, not for the sake of getting accolades. Those are all great, but you're doing it because you know that at the end of the day, your business will be better off. You will be better off.
The subhead, thank you for sharing that also. The subhead of your book is the power of embracing life's difficult journeys. And it's been said by lots of folks that, I'll just quote Stoicism or my dear friend Ryan Holiday. The obstacle is the way, right? It is only through difficult journeys that our lives are shaped
Mm,
and imbued with meaning. And clearly you have overcome an immense amount of an immense amount in your lives. And there are others who are born with extreme privilege. And is there a different message for
mm,
those two groups, or is your message
mm,
consistent? And how ought we remedy, the potential difference between
sure.
the difficulties that you have? I mean, just thinking of leaving your family and going to a country with
Mm,
$75 in your pocket as a 16-year-old is it's almost unthinkable. And I do not know a mother who's listening right now that would wish that for their children. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have, I was born white and male and in America in, in the 70s, have virtually everything. Are we on different paths, or is, much like the religion, much like you talk in your book, is there a unity that we ought to look for in all of this?
yeah, it's interesting. You bring up the word privilege, and I think that privilege comes in different forms. Privilege comes in the form of money. Privilege comes in the form of having a stable family. Comes from could be an environment that you are free to live the life you want to live. So it comes in many different ways. I mean, I could be wealthy in Iran, but I cannot practice my faith. Am I privileged? Maybe to some extent. But I think that I I I think this whole concept of embracing life's difficult journeys comes from my belief that life is not that different than the seasons of a year. That there's a
Mm.
cycle. You've got winter, followed by spring, followed by summer, fall, then winter comes again, and so on. After every uphill, there's a downhill. After every downhill, there's an uphill. Life is the same. Every crisis is followed by victory, and every victory by crisis. Crises prepare us for hopefully a greater success. So we almost look like a good stock that goes up to the right, but along the way we have our downs, and that's okay. Those downs give us a chance to reflect, give us a chance to learn, give us a chance to get prepared for the next high in our life. And the point is that when we are experiencing those crises, to not feel despair, to not feel depressed, and just know that good things are about to hit us. And when we have those periods of success, not get too comfortable because crises are just around the corner. They will hit us. And that's just simply the cycle of life. And I think once we appreciate that, we get it, then it becomes a lot easier. Just uphill, downhill. And when you're driving, we don't worry about it. Don't worry about it in your life either. Not too much.
It's just like driving.
It's
I
just like
love it.
driving.
There's a couple lines in the book that stood out to me. One, man, I'm just looking for it here in my PDF. Are you able to detach yourself from the losses in your life? Is the equivalent of the
Mm,
phrase, and can you, it's sort of like meditation. Are you able to recognize that your thoughts are not you? Because the fact that you can actually witness your thoughts, there's a separation. And the same concept. Oh, here it is. Chapter 19. Are you able to detach yourself from personal and business losses in your life, to see them at a distance, to not get lost in the pain and the immediacy of failures? How valuable is that skill? And is it a skill? B, how valuable is it?
I think that's an essential skill to have. It is easy to speak to different people from all walks of life in the US, the country of plenty, the country of opportunities, that they see obstacles. And to me, life is like an obstacle course, but it's not fully blocked. You got to find your way around those obstacles, and that's the game. And that's fun. You got to get enjoyment out of that and know that there's always a passage, there's always a way to get to the other side. And I talk about this in my book that reminds me of my karate lesson that I took many, many years ago. I was supposed to break this board and I couldn't do it. And finally, the sensei told me that that's because you think about the pain. You're not thinking about being on the other side of the board. Forget the pain, think about that. And the moment you do that, you realize that there is a way. And that's, now having said that, as someone who has learned over the years, I am, in a sense, enjoying the privileges of being an American today that came about as a result of a lot of people who came before me to make this available, to build this ecosystem. Part of it was built unjustly. I mean, you look at the plight of African Americans in this country and how the Black people were treated for so many years. So I cannot just ignore the fact that different people have a different level of obstacles. Uh, my level of obstacles is different than somebody who was born into a family and had his parents and whatever and was wealthy in this country, born in Connecticut. Absolutely, I get that. But at
Yeah.
the
Or
same time,
women is a big,
woman,
yes,
absolutely. But
yes.
the point I try to make to my African American brothers and sisters, I want to make to the woman that only 2% of VC money is invested in them, to everybody that does not have a fair chance at success. Don't let the oppressor define your level of success. Just don't do it. Don't let that happen. Your path is a bit more treacherous, a little bit more difficult than others. I totally get it, fully get it. Your success, the way that you're going to find answers and get around those obstacles is going to define you and should define you.
What was the process of writing this book like for you? Was it painful? Was it joyful because you got to package? And I like to think of books as being just really useful packages for ideas. You can
Mm,
hand someone a pile of ideas.
yeah,
But was it difficult to relive so many of the challenges of your childhood? Did it give you sort of renewed hope because you're packaging these ideas that were built on hope? What was the experience
yeah.
that you had?
As we know, there are many layers in life that, somebody may be watching this or listening to this, and the layer they see is an author talking about his book. But there are other layers. My home life, my what's going on in my business right now, what am I thinking about the plight of Baha'is in Iran today? The points are many layers. When I read my own book, when I was editing my own book, tears were flowing, and I was highly, highly emotional. Even reading some pages that were not supposed to be emotional pages, because that was putting me back into other aspects of my life at that moment that I was also dealing with. I would read pages for my wife, and I would tell her I'm getting emotional, and I would cry. And so it's been definitely an interesting journey to go through this process. Um, I'm glad I did it. I think that um, uh, at the end of it, though, some of it were tears of joy, because I think that I put myself in the situation, the struggles and the challenges and the pain, but then it's all okay. You got to persevere, you got to keep going, and you got to have that North Star. And there's no question that having the spiritual beliefs that I had, having the belief system that I had, made it all a lot easier. I feel like if I didn't have the spiritual belief and that foundation, when I lost it all, it would have been a very challenging period for me. But as those who know me, they realize I did not miss a beat. I did not think for a moment that, oh, poor me. The way I looked at it was I came from nothing. I've got more than nothing, and life is good. I'm going to keep moving forward. And I think that having the spiritual beliefs made it a lot easier as I was going through the challenges.
Many of the values you're quite clear on in your business and by extension your life: unity, intention, independence, love, truthfulness, and justice. Do you feel like those can simultaneously be good for business and good for humanity? And is that in fact why you have, chosen those?
Absolutely. I believe that truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtues. And without that, I think the rest of them cannot be acquired. So I cannot be a just person but not truthful. I cannot be a kind person but not truthful. So I feel like that is a foundational value. And again, I really don't like the concept that a lot of people sign up for. And they say, well, business is business. Business is not just business. Business is a big part of my life. Business is how we interact with each other, with humanity. So I believe that business actually provides us with a very powerful arena to live those values, and not bringing those to our work would make work a very sad place.
The book is Crossing the Desert: The Power of Embracing Life's Difficult Journeys. I want to say thank you so much for writing this book. It is stunning and beautiful, and your story is very, very eloquently told. And it is it's an emotional read. It's very I felt very connected to you through the process, and it's been a delight to connect with you in person here. Uh, besides supporting you and purchasing the book, is there any other place where you would steer our listeners' attention to get a little bit more, a little more information, a little deeper, perhaps, on you, your background? Any place you'd like to direct our attention?
First of all, I really hope that I appreciate your time and for inviting me to your show. And I think that people reading the book, and that at the end of every chapter there's an opportunity to reflect and potentially talk to others, your family members, friends, spouse, about what you've just read. Do that and share your insights in social media, and tag me. So I'll step in and I'll add to it and I'll give you some of my thoughts. I would love to hear those, your experience as you read the book. It would be an amazing experience for me. I appreciate that.
Excellent. We will. We're good at connecting with others on the internet. This is a
Yeah.
virtual community, and we genuinely, Pam, thank you so much for your time. It's special to connect with you, and I'm looking forward to continuing to follow you on your journey. For everybody out there in the world, please do share this. It's very touching. Today's broadcast, today's episode, and of course, it's an absolutely lovely read. And we'll look for more. We'll follow you closely and look for more from you. And until next time, from Payam and myself, we bid you a great day. Thank you so much for listening.